Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Good to see you again. I want to go a little deeper into the commercial real estate issue and the potential impact on regional banks. This morning, Scott Rector, who's a member of the New York Fed Board of Directors, released a white paper on CNBC this morning describing the trillions of dollars in commercial real estate loans that will come due over the next couple of years. He described it as a, quote, slow-moving train wreck, close quote, and for our regional banks. He went on to predict that it will force a little over 500 banks, thereabouts, to either fail or consolidate. He also described what he termed as a doom loop where, similar to Silicon Valley Bank, when people lose confidence, when depositors lose confidence in the bank, they pull their money out and we end up in a bad situation. Now, I don't believe everything that I read or hear, but in Congress we do tend to repeat it. And I just wanted to get a sense from you. I am seeing in my own city of Boston, we've got 20% vacancy rates in office space. We rely on that for a lot of the tax revenues for the city. But I'm just wondering your thoughts on that issue. Is there a systemic concern here, or is this isolated? And might lowering the interest rates help some of those banks? Because I hear from my developers in our area that no one's lending. So, you crack at it?
Sure. So I haven't seen that report, so I can't comment on it, but I can comment on commercial real estate. So we've had a secular change in the economy, which has left office rentals in many places, office buildings. The demand for them is significantly lower, at least temporarily and perhaps for a long time. And also the same is true for downtown, in some places, downtown retail that's associated with office workers. So it's a shock to the system, and we've known this for some time, and we've gone through the commercial banks in the United States, and so have the other regulators. We've done it jointly, and identified the ones that have high concentration and are going to need to deal with that. And so we've been in contact with those banks and talking to them about how they're going to deal with this, how are they going to absorb these losses, do they have enough capital, do they have the liquidity, do they have a plan to do this, and is it consistent with their lending practices and that kind of thing. So it's going to be something we work through over a period of years, and I do think it's slow moving. I think that part of it is right. You ask about 500 banks. I have no idea about that number. But certainly there would be some banks, probably smaller ones, that have these high concentrations. It's not the very large banks. It's really a manageable thing at the large banks. So I think that's what it's going to be, and it's a serious problem, and more serious in some locations and jurisdictions and with some banks than others. But it's one we'll be working through. And I think that's how I would think about it.
Does the Silicon Valley Bank situation, Signature, the money moves so quickly in those cases. It was instantaneous now. The velocity of money moving out of those banks really, I think, in some ways contributed to their failures. Are we looking at anything technologically that might be able to address some of that or mitigate it?
Sure. So we also, after Silicon Valley Bank, we got in contact with and worked with financial institutions that had high concentrations of uninsured deposits, and many of them have greatly improved their liquidity position. So that's the thing that we're working on. Okay. As you probably know, we're also working on some liquidity rules which will strengthen our framework of liquidity rules. But that's something we haven't proposed yet.
Let me ask you something off topic. So we know that Russia has about $300 billion in U.S. We've frozen assets, Russian assets of about $300 billion between U.S. and European banks. You want to comment on that? What I'd like to see is us give that to Ukraine, to be honest with you. I know that's a very simplistic idea, but I'm just wondering if there's any historic example that we could look to if Congress has to take the necessary steps to redirect that money to Ukraine so they can feed their people and fight that war.
This whole area of sanctions and foreign assets and things like that is really controlled and directed by the administration, by the elected branch of government. All we are is just a technical seat around, in the back row to help. We don't make those decisions, and I wouldn't comment.
I know you're big on history. I was just wondering if there was any examples out there that we might provide guidance to us.
Gentleman's time's expired.